Hello, welcome to the channel and to this look at the Adeptus Custodes Codex, which is available for pre-order from today. As ever, thanks to Games Workshop for sending it through to me and to other content creators. Get a little pause into it and give you an idea of what's on the inside. Overall, it's pretty good. Much of the complexity has been reduced. Many of the datasheets themselves are exactly the same, some have a few tweaks here or there. There's 4 detachments in this book. One of them is an affront to the Emperor of Mankind himself, but we'll talk about that one when we get to it. And Custodes with Castellan axes no longer hit on 3s. Finally, it doesn't matter whether you're taking a Guardian Spear or Castellan axe, you're hitting on 2s. The fact that they could previously hit on 3s with Castellan axes, and then if they're targeted with a stratagem which makes them -1 to hit, Custodes hitting on 4s with axes, that was just wrong. But they're back to hitting on 2s in close combat with all their things. I like that. And I feel like Custodes should be a low model count, high elite army, which is relatively easy for new players to pick up and get playing with straight away. And in 9th edition, it was a bit too complex to recommend it that way. But back in this edition, with this new codex, I can recommend it for new players one more time. If you play this Shield Host detachment, stick only with just Custodes, you're going to have a low model count, high elite army, which is relatively simple and quick to play in this edition. Great for new people. Having said that, 2 of the detachments in here concern the Sisters of Silence. It's not just an Adeptus Custodes book, it's also a Sisters of Silence book as well. The Sisters of Silence being the pariahs, the Null Maidens of the 41st millennium. There's a detachment which is all about them, another detachment which concerns them, and 100 points for a unit of 10 prosecutors. Not too expensive for 10 toughness 3-up save ladies. Don't use the points in the book, however, because the points in the book are behind the curve. They have been changed in the last balanced data slate, so for those that don't know, go to warhammercommunity.com and download the most updated points for this army. As ever, in the point section in the book, there's a QR code that you can scan. It'll take you straight there. But yeah, the points in this thing are up. They're not as up. A unit of 4 Custodes, a unit of 5 Custodes in this book, points-wise, actually cost as much as 4 5 Custodian Guard, using the actual points found in the balanced data slate, cost the same amount of points as the 4 Custodian Guard in this book. Basically scan the QR code. So yeah, just a reminder that the Silent Sisterhood is in this book. Very cool. Everyone should read Watchers of the Throne by Chris Raitt. That's a really cool series. And they've changed the baseline ability of all the Silent Sisterhood in this book. They now have a 3+ Feel No Pain against all mortal wounds and psychic attacks, which is nice. 3+ feels really strong, but it is against only psychic attacks and mortal wounds. So I like the fact that it feels that strong, because that's in line with the narrative, to my mind anyway. Now, I collect Custodes, don't have any sisters, but I was interested to see if any of the core data sheets have changed. By core data sheets, I mean Wardens, Alaris Terminators, Virtus Praetors, those are the bikes, Custodian Guard, Shield Captains. You know, the core models that every Custodes player has. Well, essentially, they're all the same. There's only 2 exceptions. Trajan Valorous has got his 3 abilities that he can pick once per battle, and one of them is gone, the ability to fight first. He still has a once per battle 2-up invulnerable save, or once per battle gets his attacks characteristic up to 12, but he loses his fight first. And the Shield Captain is everything is the same, despite them having a new model. The only exception being the new model has access to a Pyrite Spear, and the Pyrite Spear has the same melee profile as a Guardian Spear, only it fires a melter shot instead of just a normal storm bolter. It's straight out of the Horus Heresy, the Pyrite Spears. I love it. Of course, you can still take him with a spear or a Castellan axe, which hits on 2s now. Did I mention that? But yeah, apart from that, all the data sheets are the same. Mordens do what they do. Terminators do what they do. Custodian Guard can still teleport in. The strength, value, AP, number of attacks of all the things are the same. They haven't messed with them. They didn't really need messing with, so I appreciate the fact that they didn't. It seems to be that someone at HQ, someone in the rules writing department, realizes that this should be the go-to army for new people entering the game. Here's a tough army, here's some basic rules. This is what they do. And talking about that, let's go and have a look at the army rule. What I want to do is mainly focus on the army rules and the detachments in this book, because that's where a lot of the change is. Because apart from the shield captain, there's no new models. You've still got the stuff in it that you had it. But the Contempted Dreadnought's in here, the Land Raider is in here. Maybe with Custodes 11th edition, we're going to get a couple of new models with the Custodes then when the story arc of the Yellow King is fully revealed. Who knows? But in this, it's pretty stripped down and I like it because I haven't actually touched Custodes yet in 10th edition. So this actually gets me excited for getting them out on the battle grid. So as you can see from the image, the main army rule has changed. No more feel no pain and any of that shenanigans. The army rule is just which stance you want to adopt. Previously there were 3 stances with the shield host attachment, but this is the army rule now. And I like the fact that there isn't the -1 to hit the unit that is getting. There was a feels bad, right? When Custodes players were saying, hey, my entire army is -1 to hit in the fight phase. That's gone. There's 2 stances that you can pick. One is sustained hits, one is lethal hits. And it's not army-wide as well, which didn't make any sense. You pick it on a unit-per-unit basis. When this unit is fighting, I want this unit to have sustained hits because they're smashing into a bunch of orcs. When this unit is fighting, I want it to have lethal hits because it's hitting that really big stomper. Nice and simple. What ability do you want your units to have in close combat? Exploding 6s or 6s to hit auto wound. Pick which one per unit as you go through the battle. Nice. Also, if you're fighting against them, be aware that that's what Custodes do now. Lethal or sustained, martial Qatar, and it only affects Custodes models. The Sisters of Silence don't have this, naturally. Then we have our first detachment, the Talons of the Emperor. This one has been leaked online on Warhammer community, and it's all about Sisters of Silence staying close to Custodes. If Sisters of Silence are close to Custodes, or Custodes closer to Sisters of Silence, they both get a buff. So Sisters of Silence have a 3-up feel no pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds, and if Custodes stay within 6 inches of them and you have this detachment, they get a 5-up instead of a 3-up against those things. And then the Sisters, well, they add 1 to the hit roll. The Radiant Mantle and the Gift of Terran Artifice are the 2 go-to enhancements in this. One gives your Adeptus Custodes -1 to hit against anything within 12 inches, and the other one gives the bearer only add 1 to the wound roll, but +1 to wound on a Custodes model is quite strong, particularly if they're swinging an axe or a Guardian Spear. Guardian Spear's been strength 7, axes at strength 9, +1 to wound is tasty. And this detachment is all about the Silent Sisterhood and the Custodes working together, so almost all of the stratagems in this section say that they can target 2 units. Basically you select a Custodes unit. But you can select a second unit if one and only one of them is an Anathema Psychana unit, the Sisters, and they're both within 6 inches of each other. That doesn't mean that you have to select 2. It means you can select up to 2 if they're in range of each other. For example, we have Shield of Honor stratagem. You can use it in your opponent's shooting phase so that the shots have to go into the Custodes units rather than your Sisters unit. And Hunt as 1 is quite a nice one as well, allows your units to full max shoot and charge. Again, as you can see, up to 2 Custodes units from your army, which means you can do 1, but you can only select 2 if the second one is a Sisters unit. So while this detachment is really about bringing Custodes and Sisters together, it's not really about Custodes at all. I mean, the detachment ability gives you a 5-up feel no pain to mortal wounds for your Custodes, which is nice. But really you're bringing it for the add 1 to hit roll for your Sisters units. You're bringing it because you want to sprinkle in some cheap scoring units, move blocking units, units that are capturing secondary objectives in and amongst your Custodes units, which are doing the big hitting, moving up the table and causing all sorts of disruption, or deep striking in, because Custodes, well, they've pretty much all got deep strike, so they're landing in the backfield or on the flanks, doing some damage. Next up, we have the good old-fashioned shield host. This is basically running solo Custodes, and once per battle, they get a buff. Once per battle, their martial Qatars kick off on a 5 rather than a 6. So sustained hits and lethal hits on 5s rather than 6s. And when that once per battle ability is called, they also increase their AP by 1. +1 AP in melee. Now, you shout it at the start of a battle round and it lasts until the next battle round, so it can potentially kick in for 2 rounds of combat, your turn, your opponent's turn, or vice versa. But nice and simple and stripped down. Once per battle shout out. Then the go-to enhancement from the Hall of Armories is add 1 to the strength and damage characteristics of a shield captain model. So you can get their Guardian Spear up to strength 8, 3 damage, or you can get their axes up to strength 10, 4 damage axes. Castellan axes, still strength 9, -1 only, 3 damage a time, but at strength 10, -1, 4 damage a time. That one's quite juicy. And also the Auric Mantle, which you can put on a shield captain or a blade champion, adding 2 to the bearer's wounds characteristics. So if they're in a Terminator plate or flying around on a jet bike, you're looking at a shield captain with 9 wounds, which is nice. For an army that wants to get in close combat, the stratagem Multipotentiality is going to be a good one. It's going to be a go-to one, which allows a Custodes unit from your army to fall back, shoot, and charge. And that could be the Contempted Dreadnought, that can be your bikes, that could be your... that's anything. 1 CP to fall back, shoot, and charge is good. You have Vigilus Eternal. That's the old school sticky objectives. They still have a sticky objectives. And then Avenge the Fallen gives you extra attacks. If you've lost a model in a unit, all the remaining models in the unit get an extra attack. And if they're below half strength, an extra 2 attacks. I think this one is rather essential for a low model count, highly elite army. It prevents it falling off the cliff quite substantially. As units take casualties, they can get much weaker. Much less offensive output. Custodes have a base 5 attacks as well, so long as you lose a model in the unit, having a base 6 attacks on the 3 or 4 guys still remaining in that unit is a nice one. It's a go-to one. The next detachment is called the Null Maiden Vigil and only affects Null Maidens. The Sisters of Silence, and I'm not going to dwell on this one for very long. It's a bit like the Kroot Carnivore one in the Tau Codex, which is like something they put in there because it's nice. But if anyone's run the Kroot Carnivore detachment from the Tau Codex, please let me know in the comment section. Has anyone run it? Has anyone gone against it? Have we seen it on the tabletop yet? And what was it like? Because I feel like it's a nice one, but not a great one. So we've got the Null Maiden Vigil, which affects Sisters, and it's all about battle shock, and this is one of the reasons why it's a nice one but not a great one, because it affects battle shock. And I think the community here have decided that failing battle shock ain't all that. I mean, you can just pop strats to allow you to score objectives anyway. I'm not sure battle shock is doing what GameShop thought it would do. And they're really trying to make it work. So here we have the Null Maiden Vigil, and it's all about battle shocking. There's a nice enhancement here called Oblivion Knight, and it adds 1 to the hit roll for that character and the entire unit they're attached to. So +1 to hit is nice because Sisters do hit on 3s. So having a unit that hits on 2s is nice, and when they target a Psycho unit, add 1 to the wound roll as well. It's not going to happen very much unless they're playing against Tyranids or Thousand Suns or Eldar. Maybe it'll kick in quite a bit, but adding 1 to hit, Sisters hitting on 2s, that's quite nice. We like that. And then there's some very specific stratagems, one that just affects Witch Seekers, one that just affects Vigilators. This is the one that affects Vigilators. Anathema Blade Mastery. Vigilators are the Sisters running around with the swords. They only have 2 attacks each, but they are strength 5 -2, 2 damage swords, which is quite nice. So a unit of 10 of them, that's 20 attacks at strength 5 -2, 2 damage. Stick an Oblivion Knight in there as well. They're hitting on 2s. But yeah, this allows you to re-roll the hit roll for that unit. And Vigilators, they're -1 to hit back again in melee. So Anathema Blade Mastery is quite nice. Then Psychic Abominations. This one's quite nice. Basically, you can give a Sisters unit stealth for 1 CP. So -1 to hit them at range. And if the enemy unit is battle shocked or a Psyker, they can't even shoot them if they're more than 12 inches away. But when it comes to the Sisters of Silence, I feel like if their detachment rule wasn't about battle shock and it had some more teeth in it, we might see it a bit more, but there's also the other side of the coin, which is there really aren't that many Sisters of Silence units. There's the 3 base units. A unit of sisters that run around with guns, a unit of sisters that run around with flamers, a unit of sisters that run around with swords. Those are their 3 base units, and then you have the characters on top of that. If we had some more units for the Sisters of Silence, maybe we'll get them in the future, maybe not, depends on how popular the range is. But if we had more units in this book, and if their detachment rule wasn't about battle shock, yeah, but this is where we are, and this is what it is. The final detachment is called Auric Champions, and as I said at the start, there's one in here that's an affront to the Emperor of Mankind himself, and this is it. Because this detachment only affects Adeptus Custodes characters. In your command phase, you select one unit from your opponent's army until the start of your next command phase. Each time a character model in your army, a Custodes character, attacks, targets that enemy unit, they add 1 to the wound roll. So you're thinking, who on earth would ever bring this one? There's only a couple of characters in an army, right? And only having a couple of characters in an army, getting +1 to wound, your opponent's units, once you target them, a mini Oath of Moment thing. Who would ever bring this one? Well, there's a lot of shield captains in this book. As well as bringing along Trajan, Valorous and Valerian, you can also bring along a shield captain on a Dawn Eagle jetbike, a shield captain on foot, a shield captain in Terminator armor. You could, if you wanted to, bring a dozen shield captains, and then this assemblage of might detachment rule would really kick in. You don't even need to bring shield captains attached to anything. You could have them running around on their own in units of 1. I've seen in competitive 40k that is a thing when you come to characters such as Typhus or separate characters that can deep strike in on the battle grid to get the investigate signals points or engage on all fronts points and things like that for your secondaries. Plus he's a tank, so if anyone goes near them, then they can charge, then they can hurt. I can see some people out there bringing lists with a dozen or so Custodes characters in, which I can't think of any narrative reason why you would ever do that. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do, but just because you can do them, it doesn't mean that you should do them. Like, you can jump off a cliff, but you doesn't mean you should jump off a cliff. You can live in your mother's basement and only come crawling out of it once every couple of months to go to a tournament with cooked dice. Establish dominance by pushing around the table your 3-color minimum tournament meta list. Proclaiming how brilliant you are at 40k when everything goes right, or bemoaning how terrible and broken and unbalanced the rules are when everything goes wrong. You can do that. Doesn't mean you should do that. And this detachment, which only has rules, which only benefits characters, is going to encourage a bit of that behavior. I think we're going to see some of these nerf herders crawl themselves from under rocks and run this detachment. Now, that would be okay if you've got Trajan, Valorous and say 2 shield captains, something like that. I mean, I'm not the gatekeeper of 40k, but in my opinion, if you walk up to a table and there's a dude stood there with like a dozen or so shield captains in different formats running around all over the place, is that what 40k has come to now? Maybe I'm just being pessimistic. It hasn't happened yet. No one's got their hands on this yet at the time of recording. It hasn't happened yet, and surely that's not going to happen. Surely that's not going to happen. Bring in a couple of characters. That's going to be okay. A couple is going to be okay. And if you want to bring a couple of characters and unlock this detachment, then you have the Veiled Blade, which is add 2 to the attacks characteristics of the bearer's melee weapons. Nice. Stratagem-wise, they can earn a name. Up to 2 Adeptus Custodes character units from your army that have not been selected to fight in the fight phase can reroll hits and reroll wounds against vehicles and monsters. Nice. And then this one, in the worst detachment that the Games Workshop have ever written, the greatest stratagem that Games Workshop have ever written. Why isn't this in the core rules? Shoulder the mantle. Select 1 Adeptus Custodes characters that's within 2 inches horizontally or 5 inches vertically of a friendly unit that it could lead as described on the leader section of its datasheet. That character model attaches to that unit. to form an attached unit. Change the unit's starting strength accordingly. Your character cannot attach to a unit that is already an attached unit. The ability for character models to rejoin other units. It's beautiful, it's brilliant, it's annoying when you've got a captain running around after the Hellblasters have been taken out, or your Terminator dude running around after their unit has been taken out, just on their own, hiding in a corner behind a piece of scenery, hoping no one will pick on them. This rule, this needs to be in the core rules. This needs to be, like we've got grenades and tank shock and CP rerolls. In 11th edition, this thing needs to be like a basic 1-point stratagem. Here's my character. He's now joining that other unit. I like it. However, apparently, Custodes are the only dudes in the entire Imperium that know how to do this. Anyway, that's my overview of the Custodes Codex. I will be running out the shield host of my Custodes at some point in the future. They will be coming. I'm not sure the rules in this or the models in this book for the sisters sing enough for me to make me get sisters. It was like that in the previous edition. When I'm playing Custodes, I want to play Custodes. I feel like if the Sisters of Silence had a bit more model range, or their rules, there's something missing there for me. But what about you? Do you run Sisters of Silence? Have you gone up against Sisters of Silence? How do you run them? Let me know your thoughts, comments, feedback in the comment section below. What would make you get sisters? Or have you got them already? Are you looking forward to this codex? Thanks for listening. Happy wargaming.